Lettermen Live, presented by Wendy's, is back. We've got a lot more to break down because Ohio State is on its way to the national championship game against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Lettermen Live, as always, of course, you know him, you love him, is presented by Wendy's. You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm. You know the drill by now. And if you're a real heat seeker, you can try that spicy ghost pepper. Only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's and participating U.S. Wendy's. Tim, 41-year vet, you said Jack Sawyer's play was the greatest play that you had seen defensively in Ohio State history after the game. Maybe a little recency bias there. Do you still stand by that statement? Let's get it started.
I mean, of Ohio State games I've covered, basically, maybe say as great a play as I've seen defensively in a critical game against like opponents, basically clinching a trip to the national championship game. Yeah, it's right there, man. It was totally unexpected. That's the cool thing about it. Just like Travion Henderson's 75-yard catch and run with the screen pass just before halftime, just when Texas had stepped in to make a game of it. Boom. Those were two lightning strikes that were unexpected. I don't know if you agree or not, but that is the way it is, especially the way they happened. So, but Jack Sawyer's, but what I think what gave that one depth was he didn't get his just due for one of the great plays in the game history against Michigan back on November 30th, his stirring interception at the goal line when it looked like Michigan was about to go in and take a lead-taking touchdown, score a lead-taking touchdown. He leaps out of nowhere and pulls the ball down. Of course, he didn't get his just due because Ohio State didn't do anything with that possession. Michigan got the ball back and drove down and kicked the game-winning field goal. But for a moment in time, out of nowhere, defensively, huge. Will Allen had the interception against Michigan in 2002, right at the goal line to clinch the trip to the desert, where Ohio State won the 2002 national championship. And Tavis Powell, had the interception against Alabama in the end zone or right at the goal line in 2014 that gave Ohio State the semifinal victory over Alabama. That was huge. Really, all he had to do was knock the ball down, but it is what it is. He still has that football, by the way, along with the one he had against Michigan in 2013 on a two-point attempt. But Jack Sawyer's play, anybody said they saw that coming, well, good for you. That's all I've got to say.
I mean, a sack.
I know one thing, Ryan Day didn't see it coming, but he saw it finish because he raced down the field to make sure he was in proper position to celebrate like few head coaches ever have.
To the sack, I could see coming. Jack had been really close on that third down play. On second down, he made a good play to help, or on first down, he made a good play to help stop the run there up the middle with Jarrett Gibson, the back that Texas handed it to. Like, Jack had been really close all night to getting one. To say, hey, Jack's going to get a sack.
Third down, he might have actually tipped that third down pass because he came up the middle on that. I haven't seen a replay yet that shows why that ball was so poorly thrown. He actually might have tipped that ball.
But what I'm saying is you could definitely see on fourth down a sack coming because he was bound determined to get
That's
something.
That's not what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen.
But to get the sack and then to have the ball bounce right to him on a night where, to be honest, Tim, the bounces were not going Ohio State's direction. Quinn Ewers was stripped by Sonny Styles on another sack earlier in the game that bounced right into a Texas offensive lineman's hands. They had a fumble on a punt return at the Ohio State or the Texas 13-yard line that hit the turf and somehow bounced directly up back into the punt returner's hands before he was tackled. This is a Texas team that got a couple of those fumble breaks, and it just looked like the oblong ball was not going to bounce in Ohio State's direction. And I don't know how it happened, if it was karmic or whatever it is, that ball bounced off that turf directly back to Jack Sawyer, and he picked it up and took it. Like, again, if you would have told me before that fourth down play, Jack's going to get a sack here and they're going to need 2 first downs with the run game to salt this game away, I would have said, okay, I kind of can see that coming. But to say that you're seeing that scoop and score, you know, that it was the stuff of dreams. And even Ryan Day on Sunday, amid all of his chatter of like, hey, we're fully on to Notre Dame, we're not talking about the Texas game anymore, even he was talking about that moment a little bit still, just because of how special it was.
Of course it was special. I mean, it was the dagger, it put the nail in the coffin, whatever cliche you want to throw in there. I mean, Texas looked like it was about to tie the game. You and I were sitting next to each other in the press box thinking, hey, this thing has a good chance to go into OT, overtime. Mm-hmm. And Texas had just survived an OT game against Arizona State. And so, yeah, it was huge, all kinds of reasons. And to downplay it, at this point, anybody who downplays it, I'm talking about just a shock value of not stopping them on fourth down, but stopping them with a strip sack and plucking scores what it was, because the ball bounced right up to him and he took off down the sideline. To say you saw that coming, anybody to say they saw that coming, I call BS.
Well, I thought, Tim, that game was going to come down to a Jaden Fielding field goal. And after the game, I said that to somebody who would know who knows Jaden really, really well down on the field. After the game, I said, did you think it was going to come down to Jaden? And they said, well, he wanted it to. He wanted that kick. And then, oddly enough, I saw Jaden after the game, and I said, Jaden, did you want that game to come down to your leg? And he said, absolutely. I'm from Texas, and Texas told me I couldn't play there. So he wanted it, but it didn't need to come down to that, which is good because, Jack ended up making the play that sealed it. But if it was going to be 21-21, Jaden Fielding was getting ready. He was ready to try to make a kick to win that game. And that's ultimately what, like you said, we were sitting in the press box. I thought, man, it's almost poetic that it's going to come down to a Jaden Fielding field goal after the Michigan game. Instead, it comes down to a Jack Sawyer strip sack after the Michigan game in its own little way. Those would have been kind of fitting either way that it broke. But for Jack, I mean, just the most fitting way possible. But again, let's spin it forward here. We've done 7 minutes on Jack Sawyer here.
That's okay. It's a huge play.
Absolutely. But obviously, we'll remember that play forever. It's going to stand in Ohio State lore forever, no matter what happens. But I think it will be even more remembered in the pantheon, I guess, of Ohio State all-time plays, with 85 yards through the heart of the South, with, like you said, Tyvis Powell picking off the Michigan pass in the end zone on a 2-point conversion to preserve the perfect season and to preserve Urban Meyer's perfect record against Michigan ultimately. Will Allen's interception, Maurice Claret, stripping the ball from Sean Taylor in the national championship game. Like, all of those plays happened because they won the games and because they went on to do special things. Jack's play will always be remembered. It will become even more special in the history of this program if Ohio State can knock off Notre Dame. Yeah,
but the Will Allen interception was in the game against Michigan, which cemented Ohio State's trip to the desert to play for the national championship. Tyvis Powell's interception at the goal line, and Ezekiel Elliott's 85-yard splash through the South, rip through the South, happened in the semifinal game, which put them in the national championship game. So they have their own little spots, let's put it that way, in history. This happened in a national semifinal game to guarantee they were going to the national championship game against Notre Dame. We can get into semantics about, well, yeah, but did they go in and win a national championship? Well, the first two we talked about. I mean, and then I'm not sure any play stuns you more than Maurice Claret taking the ball away from Sean Taylor after an interception there against Miami in the national championship game. So, we'll leave it at that for right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And maybe Jack will have something up his sleeve for the Fighting Irish to put a bow on this entire thing. We'll see. We haven't talked much about Ohio State Notre Dame yet. That's what we're here to do on Lettermen Live, presented by Wendy's. Tim, you see this matchup. What's the first thing that catches your eye? Because I've got something pretty specific that catches my eye that I think the Buckeyes have got to get a hold on.
Well, then maybe you ought to go first then.
Well, I'm just trying to host the show, Tim. Keep it moving.
Yeah, but what if I trump you? What if I trump you there, so to speak?
I will go first then, and I'll bring it up, and I think that it's something that should be talked about. Ohio State, 12th nationally in penalties per game. They're only averaging 4.3 penalties per game, 9 penalties for 75 yards. Really, 8 penalties for 74 yards. The last one came on a on a pass interference in the end zone that moved the ball up 1 yard for Texas. And so, you can cut it however you want, but 9 penalties for 75 yards is horrendous. 2 15-yard penalties against the offense on unsportsmanlike conduct, one by Travion Henderson, which is the most out-of-character penalty I think I've ever seen at Ohio State. In my time covering the team since 2019, can't remember a more out-of-character penalty by one of these guys. And obviously Trey made up for it, but that's not the point. It could have been 14-0 if he didn't do that, or 10-0.
He knew it.
Austin Saraveld's penalty, which I thought was questionable. It was an unsportsmanlike conduct, unnecessary roughness. I thought it was really close to the whistle. He's trying to push the pile. I think Ryan Day was even on the, not excusing that, but understanding it, because he's trying to push the pile forward in a pivotal moment. And when they've got Carnell Tate stood up, I think he was just a little late to the party there and gets a 15-yard penalty that really
interesting, though? I heard the whistle after he hit those guys, about him hitting those guys. I didn't hear the whistle before he hit those guys. If there was a whistle, I have still not heard it.
Yeah, I mean, so you don't excuse it, but you kind of understand he's being aggressive there. He's trying to help push the pile forward, but those two can't happen. Then you've got a penalty. It's the drive after Ohio State scores a touchdown. There's a penalty on Travion Henderson that puts him second and 24, and then Will Howard misses the keeper. He keeps it instead of handing it to Quinshon Judkins when it probably could have been a touchdown or at least one-on-one with a safety. Anyway, the very next drive, that Travion Henderson killed that drive. The next drive, you get a holding on Emeka Ibuka. It was called on Emeka. I think it was actually on G. Scott that pushed that drive back. The very next drive, you get a false start and a hold that kills that drive. So that's 3 straight drives. Ohio State had a chance to go up 2 scores and shot itself directly in the heel bone, Tim. You can't have that against the team.
I always question holding calls when they make the holding call and then announce the wrong player. I always question, especially when it's 2 guys who look so different than Emeka Ibuka and G. Scott Jr. I always question whether the actual hold took place. I mean, that's just the way I am. It's just bothersome. Go ahead now.
Well, I watched it back, and it was pretty clear that there was a hold there on somebody.
But how do you mix up who held?
But anyway, no matter what, like, that's 3 straight drives where you killed yourself on the drive. You killed the drive yourself. Texas didn't do anything to stop you. You killed the drive yourself. You can't do that against a Trestle ball team. You know that. You watch Jim his entire career. Marcus Freeman is a Trestle disciple through and through. He wins with special teams. He wins with defense. He wins with clean football. And the plan to win, as Jim used to say, and Jim probably still would say, is do not commit penalties. This is an Ohio State team that's been pretty good, not committing penalties all season. It's also an Ohio State team that is 134th nationally at opponent penalties per game. They're not getting called when teams are holding Ohio State, or when teams are jumping off sides, or when teams are holding receivers down the field. They don't get called. You can't have these kind of penalties against Notre Dame in the national championship game. And if you do, you're going to let Notre Dame hang around as a big underdog.
Okay. Thing I see is Notre Dame's defensive front has been a little bit hit pretty hard, actually, by injuries to a couple of key guys. But their offensive front definitely has been hit. I see, it'll be interesting because guys, just like Ohio State's offensive front has gathered itself, and I think playing extremely well considering everything it's been through this season. I see the Ohio State defensive front against their rebuilt offensive line as being a major factor in this game. If the Ohio State front 7, but especially the front 4, with Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, and, of course, the 2 ties, Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton, they continue to play at the level that they have done. I see that as not a mismatch. Well, yeah, I see that as advantage Ohio State for sure. So I was going to make mine very succinct. Obviously, you got to do something about the penalty situation. That was a crazed atmosphere at times on Friday night in AT&T Stadium, aka Jerry's World, because it was a majority Texas crowd. Let's leave it numbers wise at that. But that's where I'm looking at this game going. I think Notre Dame is limited is not the right term, but just offensively does not have the great passing attack. Let's leave it. Maybe I keep saying leave it at that. I don't know what else to say except for want of another term, which I say way too much for want of another term. But the bottom line is it's not a great passing attack, and running wise, it's a good rushing attack. But Riley Leonard is so much the man, even in their running attack when it takes to moving the ball. I just see this as advantage Ohio State's defensive front seven against what Notre Dame would like to do. And then we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a gang tackle, Jeremiah Love. He is a absolute brute to bring down.
One of the great runs ever.
That run against Penn State, he even got his legs chopped down there at like the 3-yard line and just kept going. It was one of the more remarkable few-yard touchdown runs you will ever see against this really stout Ohio State run defense, which has given up. Let me get my notes here. You know how much I love sticky notes, Tim.
Yeah.
Dylan Sampson against Ohio State, 2 carries, 6 yards. Of course, he got hurt. Tennessee had a $152 on the ground. Jordan James, Oregon's leading rusher, 7 carries for 14 yards. Oregon, sack adjusted, had just 33 rushing yards, had negative 23 as a team because of the sacks, but obviously they were in passing downs the entire game because Ohio State blitzed them with points early in the game, got up 34-0. You can't really run the ball then. Wisner, the running back for Texas, 17 carries for 46 yards. Texas as a team, 58 yards. Notre Dame has run the ball pretty well in this postseason. Obviously, the 98-yard touchdown run against Indiana beefed up their numbers against the Hoosiers, but they ran the ball relatively well against Georgia, given what Georgia's defense is, and they ran the ball pretty well against Penn State. So they're, Ohio State's going to have its work cut out for them. Giving Notre Dame free yards is going to be something they absolutely cannot do. But yeah, if this Ohio State run defense makes Notre Dame beat them through the air, which I think is going to be Jim Knowles' game plan. And remember, we talked about what Jim Knowles' game plan against Oregon was going to be, and that's what it was. I mean, we were right there. We've been wrong a couple times this year, obviously, but we kind of nailed that game plan as far as what Knowles was going to do against Oregon. I think in this game, he's going to say, okay, we're not going to let Riley Leonard scramble around, and we're not going to let this Notre Dame running game get going. We're going to make Notre Dame beat us through the air. If they do, hats off to them. But I think that's going to be the challenge for this Ohio State defense is like stop the run and make them throw the ball. And if you do that and you don't give them free yards with these penalties on either side of the ball, you're going to have a really good chance to win a national championship.
And when they throw the ball, don't give them the wheel route out of the backfield.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, oh my goodness. I'm not sure. Well, maybe Texas goes on in and scores, who knows, but 2 straight wheel route. Well, not 2 straight, but 2 wheel routes for touchdowns. One of which Sonny Styles got caught flat-footed at the, what I call the intersection between him and the running back. The running back just ran right by him. And, how many wheel routes do you ever see? How many times do you ever see a running back run a stop route or a wheel route? You know what I mean? Very seldom. It's always down the field. And then number 2, then they blitz, and there's nobody in the left flat to pick up the wheel route by Mr. Blue. And you're my boy, Blue. That's from whatever that movie was with Will
Old
Ferrell.
School.
Yeah. Wow, that was crazy when you consider all that was going on in that game, that they get their 2 touchdowns off wheel routes and the same player, pretty much the same throw. They had Sonny Styles blitzing. I think there might have been a zone blitz situation, but there was no one in the flat.
Well,
and so you just wonder. I mean, we're sitting there, and Texas had a chance to tie the game there late before the Jack Sawyer play of plays, but that game should, for want of another term, not been as close as it was.
No, it shouldn't have. That the second Jaden Blue wheel route touchdown, if you watch the All-22. Jim Knowles brings pressure, dials one up. I think it was probably a little too risky.
That's what I just said.
He even admitted that to somebody after the game. We're all trying to talk. It might have been Berman, those guys over there, admitted that it was a little too risky. And he had Tyreek Williams trying to get to the flat, dropping back because he thought the pressure was going to get home. Texas just had, and you know what? All credit to Sark. He's a great offensive mind, and sometimes he's going to get you. And he got Jim Knowles on that play. Tyreek Williams is not sticking with Jaden Blue in the wheel route. And, I mean, damn, he was wide open because the pressure didn't get home in time because it was an easy pitch and catch from Quinn Ewers to Jaden Blue, and it's 14-14, strike up the band and you know, let him play the fight song. Like, sometimes they get you. That Texas team, I think, has a lot more skill, talent, and superstar power than this Notre Dame team does. But Notre Dame uses its backs out of the backfield well. Ohio State's going to have to account for that. Notre Dame will make you pay if you slip up at least once. You know, we saw that quite literally slip up. You know, the Penn State corner falls down. They hit Jaden Greathouse on a seam route, and then he makes a safety miss. Yeah, he makes a safety miss and gets in the end zone 53 yards. Like, those are the things that Notre Dame takes advantage of. Like I said, it's reminiscent of 2024 version of Trestlebull. They're just going to keep paper cut, and eventually they pull out the knife. And if you're not ready for that knife, they're going to get you.
Yeah, and but if your plan is we're going to run a takeoff and their cornerback is going to fall down, if that's your plan, wow, that is divine intervention.
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame is Notre Dame for a reason, Tim, I guess. But we'll see. This Ohio State team is pretty religious too.
They weren't last year when they really needed him.
Yeah, I mean, this Ohio State team is pretty religious too.
Capital H.
Yeah. Okay, so that is the challenge for this Notre Dame team. We don't cover Notre Dame. We cover Ohio State. But you're certainly right in your point earlier that the advantage when Ohio State is on defense is definitely with the Buckeyes. There is a common thought around, and I think that it is apt, that Notre Dame is going to have a lot of trouble scoring points on Ohio State. And I believe that. One team, Tim, has scored more than 17 points on this Ohio State team all season. One team did it twice. And Oregon did it once with 32 points and once with 21 points, most of the 21 coming in absolute garbage time. Actually, if we're being honest, all 21 of those points technically came in garbage time because it was already 34-0.
Yeah, when it's 34-0, garbage time is on. You're exactly right.
And so the only team to hit 17 on the nose was Nebraska in the most puzzling, the second most puzzling game of the year, the most puzzling win Ohio State's had this year.
Correct. Bewilderment.
Yeah, that was just a weird game too, where the Buckeyes, I think, were just trying to toy with some things, figure some things out coming out of that bye. They were using the jack position a little bit. It was a really weird game, and Ohio State wins out in 21-17. Other than that, this team has given up, the most points they've given up is 14 to Texas, is 13 to Michigan. This Ohio State team is extremely hard to score on. And Notre Dame, as limited as it is on offense, and you know what? They've gotten this far. Congrats to them. But they are limited on offense. And so I think there's a chance here for Ohio State to really put the pressure on the Irish to be perfect on offense in order to just score a couple touchdowns. And if that's the case, then it's going to be really tough sledding for Notre Dame all night.
Yeah, the problem with Notre Dame is and this is not a problem. I mean, obviously they're in the national championship game. They figured out ways to score when they needed to score this year, except against Northern Illinois. Head scratcher for the ages. But the bottom line is they just honestly, they don't have that wide out that scares you, that you just think you have to, like Ohio State has Jeremiah Smith. And then you forget they've also got Carnell Tate and Emeka Egbuka. And for that matter, Brandon Ennis and G. Scott and even Will Kazmarek had a catch the other night. Ohio State has all these weapons, plus one of their two running backs coming out of the backfield. By the way, that just shows you the audacity of that second wheel route touchdown by Texas, because Ohio State was showing blitz almost from the get-go, and he still released his back out of the backfield. And I'm talking about Quinn Ewers did, and they were able to hook up. So you got to have some audacity when it comes to playing against this Ohio State defense, I do believe. And there's, you can scheme things. You can still scheme guys open for a disadvantage. But, like I've talked about the divine intervention, that was definitely that on the Greathouse touchdown against Penn State, where your defender just literally falls down, and the safety, Greathouse put one of the great moves ever on the safety there with those, and boom, he's gone to complete the play. But some things have to, let's say this, whatever you design for Notre Dame, those things have got to go right for you,
Yeah.
And you can't always count on slippages, divine intervention, things like that. Things have to go right for you. Ohio State's got a lot of options in its offense that look like they're possible mismatches or definite advantages. Let's put it that way, if they can get to them. So really, the onus is going to be on Notre Dame's front four, beleaguered front four. The kid they lost. What's the kid's name they lost before the Penn State
Riley
game?
Mills.
Yeah, the guy's a big time player. And you lose a guy, and then you get some guys hobbled after that game. Their front four in a microcosm, front seven in a macrocosm, has really got to come to play in that Monday night game.
Well, let me get to this first, Tim, and then we'll get into the Notre Dame defense against the Ohio State offense, because this has been a good conversation so far about that Ohio State defense against this Notre Dame offense. You know it. You love it. You know where I'm going with this. You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Because Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and the spicy nugs you love. You, the viewer, you love them. They turn them up to 11 with these saucy nugs. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey, barbecue, garlic, parm, the real heat seekers. They tried that spicy ghost pepper on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. You're going to need a glass of milk. Those things are hot. That's 11 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's, a participating U.S. Wendy's. Thanks to Wendy's, as always, they've been helping us through the entire season. The nugs have been a welcome addition to the program this entire season. We love you, Wendy's. Thank you so much. Tim,
yes.
Let's get to this Ohio State offense versus the Notre Dame defense. This is not going to be the spiciest take or the sauciest take. I think it's going to be around that honey barbecue level, but I'll say it anyway.
I like honey mustard myself, but go ahead.
Listen, Michigan, and I hate to bring it up. I know Ohio State fans, I know. Just bear with me.
It is what it is, ladies and gentlemen.
If you win a national championship, no one cares. Michigan gave Texas the blueprint of using its defensive tackles, telling Ohio State you're not going to beat us over the top, and making the Buckeyes drive the length of the field. It didn't work against Michigan. It only worked 3 times against Texas, and really it only worked twice against Texas because Ohio State executed a big play at the end of the half on the screen pass. That's not driving the length of the field. And that was Texas's that was the only gaffe that Texas had the entire game on defense. I mean, it's one thing that Ohio State just executes 2 different drives and drives down the field. The other touchdown was, I think Texas took a gamble there, blitzing that safety and dropping everybody else back, and Ohio State just made a special play. Texas executed that game plan very well, the Michigan game plan. A lot of zone coverage, nothing over the top, and you let your defensive line cook against the run game. They did that pretty well. I think Ohio State had 81 rushing yards against Texas. Yeah, Ohio State had 81 rushing yards against Texas. Sack adjusted had 98. Buckeyes still won the rushing battle, so Ryan Day tipping the cap there. But the bottom line is, Texas made Ohio State earn everything because it played zone coverage just like Michigan did, and it let the defensive line do its work. Now, Notre Dame's down on the defensive line, and Notre Dame runs more man coverage than any team in the country. They don't run a lot of zone at all. Will Howard is incredible against man-to-man. These receivers are incredible against man-to-man. My take here, and this is probably honey barbecue, is Notre Dame's going to try the Michigan and Texas blueprint. Will it work is a completely different story, but I think they're going to try, Tim.
Well, you got, any coach, you're going to, and you know this, you're going to go back. What did work against Ohio State's offense? What did slow it down? You've got to emulate something in there because it's worked. And if you're stubborn, like Ohio State was about running the ball between the tackles against Michigan about 12, 15 times of their 26 carries in that game, then shame on you. You've got to do some things that work. Now, you don't want to run stuff that makes your players feel totally out of character or uncomfortable. But the thing about bothers is not the right term. But I kept pointing out to you at different times during the game when I'd watch Jeremiah Smith run routes against whatever that lean-to. I call it the lean-to defense. You got a guy and you got 2 other guys leaning his way, a lean-to. TWO. I think that's pretty clever. There were times when he was still open. just as the play started, I'm not talking about looking back after the ball's already gone somewhere else. I think Ohio State took Jeremiah Smith out of that game more than Texas did. I will stand on that. And like Ryan Day even said the other day when we were talking to him, Texas didn't do a whole lot of things any different than other teams have done this year against Jeremiah Smith. Just Ohio State took him out of the game for whatever reasons and still had success, but didn't get that, their big scoring touchdown in a pass was a screen pass for 75 yards. You follow my drift. So the bottom line is, I think Ohio State has to be bolder in that regard of not letting Notre Dame dictate terms of Ohio State throwing to its game-breaking, maybe the best freshman receiver in history in college football, much less at Ohio State. Because that discussion has now moved on to the historical standpoint, much like a Julio Jones and what he meant to Alabama very early. And in that regard, Chris Carter, obviously, for Ohio State back in 1984, he didn't have the year. Clearly, he didn't have the year that Jeremiah Smith is having. So don't let the team, just because of what they're leaning, how they're leaning, take him out of the game. And the funny thing was, man, in my opinion, I meant to ask him this, and I talked to him just briefly after the game. We posted my Twitter. We posted that on LettermenRow.com, my little interview with him. But there was one, the one play where they did throw to him deep, and he just barely misjudged the high point of leaping for that ball at the goal line. The ball went through his fingertips. He actually touched it with his fingertips, but didn't get his whole hands up. That would have changed everything about the Jeremiah Smith mystique. He almost had a touchdown early in that game, despite the attention he was getting. So that's what, looking back on it, the great thing about where we were sitting, which, ladies and gentlemen, the press box at Jerry World, a.k.a. AT&T Stadium, much like most modern press boxes, is in essence in the end zone. Instead of having some of the best seats in the country or in the land, we have some of the worst seats in the land due to modern stadium structure. But it allows you to see stuff you don't see from the sidelines. And there were quite a few times when Jeremiah Smith could have had intermediate passing plays that weren't even looked his way. So that's my take on it. I think Ohio State learned another lesson just by the way Texas played them.
Well, I think one of the things that Notre Dame now has to do is, again, they run so much man-to-man. And Texas and Michigan both ran so much zone against Ohio State. Notre Dame's challenge is looking at what Texas and Michigan did that Oregon and Tennessee didn't, replicating a game plan while also making sure you're giving your players the best chance for them to be successful with what they do. There's a reason they run man-to-man so much. It's not because they're corners. It's not because that's just the philosophy. It's not the Ryan Walters system at Purdue and when he was at Illinois, where like, no matter what, we're running man. It's because their corners are better in man-to-man. But Ohio State's receivers are better than they are in man-to-man coverage. And so you can't just sit back and think that, the Penn State game plan for Notre Dame was like, hey, we're challenging these receivers because they can't move. They can't do anything. And guess what? Penn State's receivers had 0 catches for 0 yards against Notre Dame because Notre Dame's corners were better than Penn State's receivers in man-to-man situations. I'm telling you, if Notre Dame tries this whole man-to-man thing like they did against Penn State against Ohio State will score 35-plus points and run away with the national championship. So Notre Dame's entire challenge for this, and this obviously sounds like a pro Ohio State show. It's really just what Notre Dame is up against.
Right.
And, that's just the bottom line. Like, the folks in the desert are telling you this is a 2-possession game. So, like, we're treating it that way. The challenge for Notre Dame is like, okay, we have to put our guys in the best position for them to be successful relative to their skill set, which is man-to-man, while also not getting buried by these Ohio State wide receivers. Al Golden is a fantastic defensive coordinator. He's now got to put that game plan into effect in 9 days and make sure his guys are now it's 6 days from now, and make sure his guys are ready to go, or else it's going to be a long night for their defense. Now, Ohio State's going to have to block these guys, and they're going to have to execute, and they're going to have a plan against Notre Dame's plan. So we'll see how it plays out, but that's just what Notre Dame's up against here when Ohio State has the football. Is like, if you keep doing what you did against Penn State, you're not winning this game. So now you got to figure out what to do against an Ohio State team that's much better on the outside than Penn State was.
Yeah, and I'm just looking. I'm looking at who Notre Dame's beaten. They've beaten Indiana. They had Rourke seeing. I don't know what he was seeing. His eyeballs were this big all night until about the fourth quarter. Talking about Indiana's transfer quarterback from Ohio.
Yeah.
They had Brock. What's the kid's name?
Gunnar Stockton.
Gunnar Stockton, yeah, from Georgia. They had his eyeballs this big. Georgia was reluctant to really throw the ball because of their freshman quarterback having to deal with it. And then, of course, last week, we've seen the Penn State act low these many years. We've seen it the last couple of years with Drew Aller. He's hit or miss, especially when you get pressure on him. And he was more miss when they needed to be hit in that game. This is a totally different animal they're going against from an offensive standpoint in Ohio State. They have got to, if they decide to stick to their guns, they have got to blitz Ohio State back to the Stone Age and get to Will Howard. I thought Ohio State did a good job of getting him out of the pocket quite a few times the other night and giving him some freedom, because Texas had some modicum of success rushing the passer. But for Notre Dame, that's, if they're going to stick with their man-to-man, they've got to be we know they're going to blitz, but they've got to be effective at it. And so that's their challenge. I mean, it really comes down to that, in my opinion. But then Ohio State has two running backs who are really good at blitz pickup and or can beat you with a little flip pass. So there's the challenge. That'll be it in a nutshell in terms of whether they can neutralize or at least control or throttle Ohio State's offense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. What are you most looking forward to hearing, or what do you want to hear from Ryan Day, or what do you want to hear from these players in the next few days? We're going to talk to coordinators on Tuesday. We're going to talk to players, and then Ryan Day on Wednesday. Then we'll head down to Atlanta. On Saturday, we'll hear from damn near the whole team, media day for the national championship game. We'll hear from Ryan Day on Sunday. Then they'll kick the sucker off on Monday, and they'll play a football game. What do you want to hear in the lead up, Tim? You've got a week now to ask a lot of questions, to see what's going to go on, what the mood is for both of these teams heading into this titanic showdown of college football historic powers. Like, what are you wanting to hear from Ryan Day, from Will Howard, from any of these Buckeyes that makes you think that they're ready for this game?
Well, from Will Howard, I'm wanting to hear if he's ever even heard of Malik Zaire, who puts out that ridiculous tweet. I mean, the great thing about Twitter is everybody has an opinion. But wow, that came out of like sort of left field. All that Will Power has done. Will Power. that's my IndyCar background there. All that Will Howard has done is lead his team to the national championship, and with the exception of a couple of interceptions, has played exceptionally in this tournament against better competition, in my opinion, across the board than Notre Dame has faced on its ride through the first round, quarterfinals, and semifinals. Will Howard has stood tall, pardon the expression, and delivered and been a leader. So Malik Zaire, we all know he's from the Dayton area, got spurned by Ohio State in the recruiting process, went to Notre Dame, and I think ended up transferring out of Notre Dame. So it must not have been a great experience for him there. But has Will Howard even heard of Malik Zaire? Number two, it's funny because when we were talking with Ryan on Sunday on that quick Zoom call, he didn't really want to talk about what happened for the most part in the Texas game because they've moved on from that. And he's not going to give us their game plan and what they're looking at, except that Notre Dame's a really fine football team that's playing in the national championship and has earned its way and is tough and blah, blah. We're not going to get anything specific from Chip Kelly or Jim Knowles or probably even Will Howard. What you want to hear is how close to 100% is Ohio State going to be. Denzel Burke, we do believe, suffered some kind of shoulder problem and basically looked like it came on that missed tackle that everybody scorned him for. But that is what it is. Jermaine Matthews ended up playing most of that game, the lion's share of the snaps defensively, and did a great job, in my opinion. So what you want to ferret out is how close to 100% is Ohio State physically in this game. We know Notre Dame is not going to be 100% from the standpoint of who they're going to be missing. And then the other thing is the unsung guys. I mean, I'm going to do several stories, but the unsung guys for this Ohio State football team, even though they've gotten some rep, is, in my opinion, are Tyleek Williams and Ty Hamilton. They were always going to be the cornerstones, even though they're in the middle. They were always going to be the cornerstones for this defense and this defensive front if they played at a high level. And I think the first three playoff games, they have played at an exceptionally high level. And can they carry through one more game against Notre Dame's front? Because just like all of these games, it comes down to the battle in the trenches. We saw Ohio State throw the dagger with the battle in the trenches after 1st and goal at the 1 yard line by Texas the other night. And then Jack Sawyer was in on all three of the last 3 plays that decided, or 3 of the last 4 plays that decided that game. And can they do it one more time? Can they summon what they need from that starting front 4, which I think might be a little bit underrated in Buckeye lore at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it can be properly rated if they win a national championship. My big thing that I want to hear, Tim, as we get ready to get out of here, my big thing that I'm ready to hear or curious to hear is obviously the health of Denzel Burke. Ryan Day said he's going to be able to go against Notre Dame, but he didn't play the second half of a win-or-go-home game. This is the guy who said natty or bust. This is the guy who wanted this more than anybody, like return to Ohio State, set the tone for the entire season, and then doesn't play in the second half of the biggest game of the year when Ohio State was quite frankly struggling. And so, he must have been pretty hurt, or they really must have trusted Jermaine Matthews and said, okay, Denzel, we'll get you to Notre Dame. We just need to win this game with Jermaine. I want to hear if he's fully healthy. And then additionally, just a couple of bumps and bruises. We saw, Josh Fryer. I don't think he looked 100%. He looks like everybody's going through a little bit of something. I think all these offensive linemen are starting to hurt a little bit. There's no depth.
Count on it. You can count on it.
It's like clockwork. I saw on the rewatch very late in the game, they're trying to run the ball down near the goal line, and Will Kazmarek starts grabbing for that ankle, slow to get up, and then goes in there and delivers an incredible block on the 1 yard line for Quinshon Judkins' go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter. But hey, you take that cleat and that wrap off, and I'm sure Saturday that ankle didn't feel too good.
Yep.
How's he doing? Because he's an integral part of this run blocking for Ohio State. JT Tuimoloau, who's all of a sudden banged up, got that ankle injury, played exceptionally well in the fourth quarter, had a big the tackle on 1st and goal from the 1 on Jarrett Gibson that made Sark question up going up the middle and went to that pitch play to the outside that everybody's all of a sudden questioning. That Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom snuffed out. Hey, JT Tuimoloau played really well in the second half for a guy with an ankle that was clearly not 100% after the replay that we saw of that ankle injury in the first half. So, but again, that's an ankle injury where you take that wrap off and you take that cleat off and you're on that flight home. Hey, I guarantee that thing's hurting. Notre Dame is extremely banged up. Anthony Knapp, starting left tackle, is not going to play in this game. Charles Jagasaw, who tore his pec, was supposed to be the starting left tackle in August, tore his pec, is all of a sudden back. And he might make his first start of the season at left tackle for the injured Anthony Knapp, who was starting all season in place of the injured Charles Jagasaw. Kind of weird. Rocco Spindler has an ankle injury. Is he going to be able to play? He's a guard that's going to have to be tasked with blocking 2 really, really good defensive tackles. Both of these teams are so banged up, and this is a consequence, whether you call it a unintended or just intended. It is not who's playing the best anymore in college football. It is a war of attrition.
Who's limping the least?
Georgia played without its starting quarterback. Texas was on its 5th running back in the game against Ohio State, and all of its receivers were banged up. You can tell Isaiah Bond wasn't 100% in that game. Penn State is playing, Abdul Carter's barely got his arm on his body, and he's out there giving it his all, and it wasn't enough. Notre Dame and Ohio State have won the war of attrition, and it's time to win one more for each of these teams. which one of them is better suited in this game to be ready to play with all of the guys who are banged up, because both of these teams are going through it on the injury front, Tim. And whichever one of these teams is better in the next 7 days at preparing themselves to play in this game is going to win this game. So that's what I want to hear in the next week is like all these injury updates.
Well, you're not going to get, clear defined answers to it.
No.
You understand that. But the interesting thing, what I always said when they went to this 12-team format, this is college football rosters are not built for this. No. And it's knock on wood lucky that Ohio State and Notre Dame have reached this point no more banged up than they are. And I always say the magic number was 8, not 12, definitely not 16. That's just, what are you doing? That's just producing inventory for ESPN and television, because it's, we saw in the first round of this thing how that gives you some unequal, non-equal matchups. So why go that route? But the magic number was 8, and even 8's a lot when you consider most of these teams will have played in a conference championship game. But the interesting thing is the 2 teams that escaped the semifinals were 2 teams that did not play in conference championship games. That's Ohio State in the Big Ten and Notre Dame, still Free Willy when it comes to its independence. And to me, if that's a coincidence, that's a coincidence. It's not for me. I mean, 8 is the magic number. That's what they ought to be looking at moving forward, not expansion, but contraction. But with that said, there are a lot of guys out there playing with just pure courage and whatever other gallant cliche you want to put on them. And it's definitely every lineman out there. They're banging heads on every play, as Donovan Jackson was talking to me about the 2 nights before Ohio State and Texas played. Everybody's hurting for certain just how much. And can you hang on, Sloopy, for one more game? So it's going to be interesting to watch in the Mercedes-Benz Dome.
Guys, Ohio State made it clear. Denzel Burke made it clear from the jump. This is natty or bust. They've made the natty. Now the choice is as crystal clear as possible. It is either natty or bust. We'll find out a week from today. Monday, January 20th in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. A lot of you will be there with Lettermen Row. Lettermen Row will be there in full force. Tim made the 41-year bet. Mick Walker is going to be there doing some recruiting stuff and also taking photos of the national championship game. Spencer Holbrook, myself, I'll be there. This is my first national championship game, I believe, Tim. This is your sixth. 2002, 2006, 2007, 2014, 2020, and 2024.
Yeah.
So, this is your sixth, Tim. We're happy to have you. 6 out of 41 is a pretty good percentage. This is my first because I didn't get to go to the 2021 because I got COVID in New Orleans at the Superdome. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm really excited for the opportunity.
I'm not laughing at you, but did you hang out with the Clemson guys too on Bourbon Street? Is that where you got it?
Sure. We'll just say that. I think I got it at Cafe Du Monde, but that's a story for an entirely another time. That was 4 or 5 years ago. This is the 2024 National Championship game in the 2025 calendar year between Ohio State and Notre Dame. It is a week from today. We will see you in Atlanta later this week for full coverage of Ohio State Notre Dame in the National Championship game. The good news for all of you is if you go to lettermenrow.com right now, you get the full week of coverage leading up to the National Championship game for just $1. That's 7 days for $1 at lettermenrow.com. That's the full week of coverage for the national championship game. It doesn't get any better than that. Thanks to our friends over at Wendy's for presenting this show. As always, it's Letterman Live presented by Wendy's. We will see you in Atlanta for the national championship coverage later this week, and we'll see you in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center Tuesday and Wednesday for full coverage of those media days, and we'll see you guys for certain over at lettermenrow.com.